Well, hello everyone, and welcome back on this very cold day to my channel and to our Sunday show. I'm here at one of my favorite places to be. I'm at Calvert's nursery, the landscaping. You can get pots, you can get all sorts of things here. We've been here before, Stuart, but today is a special day because I've been working pretty hard to get the cottage in shape, both the inside and the outside. So I decided, I can hardly talk, Stuart, my mouth is cold. I've decided that I deserve a treat. So I'm here today. I brought in my own container. We're going to put together an absolutely marvelous orchid arrangement. I'm not sure at this point where it's going to go in the house, but we'll decide that and we'll go back to the cottage and we'll put it in place, Stuart. But it is cold out here. Look at these fountains. It's a little chilly, so let's not dilly-dally out here, Stuart. Let's go inside and get started. So Phoebe, obviously I've decided on orchids today just because of their sheer drama, and I think wintertime is a good time to have them because we don't have a lot of cut flower material in our own garden, some, but not a lot. But there are so many other things that you could select besides orchids. Stuart, let's show them the variety of different kinds of tropical plants, house plants that they have.
Oh yeah.
And I've said it before, but I'll say it again. You can compose them yourself. You can buy the plant material here, but also you guys tell us about your design work that you do here at Calvert's.
Yeah, so we make all kinds of like container arrangements with all sorts of material. Orchids, yeah, we can do all orchids. We can do a mix of orchids and foliage plants. Which we end up doing a lot of, like orchids and then accented with little foliage plants like those.
Okay.
We can do only foliage. We can do preserved moss containers. We use preserved moss on a lot of our orchids, which we'll take a look at here in a little bit.
And probably succulents. I'm sure succulents are really fun. And they not only do installations for residences, but they do huge installations. I know you've done some stuff for the Thunder and other big organizations. So they're a huge enterprise. But back to me,
yes.
me and my orchids. And this is really hard, you guys, because there are so many beautiful orchids to select from that it's really hard to decide. And normally, I'll blame this on Linda Kavanaugh. Typically my go-to is white because she always had fabulous white orchids in her home, and because I just love white, and they would be really striking against that kind of a lava black color of the container. But we have other options as well. And can you describe a little bit about what type of orchids these are?
Yeah, so these are all Phalaenopsis orchids. They're Phalaenopsis hybrids. That's how they get so many different looks, colors, so many different just genetic combinations, but they're all Phalaenopsis hybrids. Phalaenopsis is a really big group of orchids.
One of the most common you see.
Yeah, definitely. Very commonly used in interior scaping, interior design, because they're just so easy to take care of in comparison to other types of orchids. Like the Cattleyas, all those can be a lot harder to hold on to their flowers. These flowers last a lot longer. But yeah, they're all just hybridized, beautiful.
Yeah, they're so exotic looking, and I can remember when I was young, they were very exotic and very unusual. I mean, you didn't find them everywhere like you do now. You can find them at your local grocery store. You could probably find them at 7-Eleven or someplace like that. I'm not really sure.
It's true.
So let's talk a little bit more about the colors. I mean, look at these big fat buds. That just makes me happy.
Yes.
So okay, so we've got white and we've got this really interesting bicolor. Yeah.
Oh, those are amazing.
Isn't nature amazing?
It is.
Yeah, really incredible.
This is one of my favorites. It's like it reminds me of like pointillism, you know.
Yes, doesn't it?
Gorgeous.
Yeah, that kind of pixelated. It almost looks as if it was man-made on one of your computers, Stuart, or some kind of video file.
Yeah, like a fractal.
And then there are these gorgeous plum color ones, kind of almost fuchsia.
Yeah.
That are gorgeous. And to me, when I look at them in my selection, it's not just about the flower itself, but it's also about the beauty of the bud form. And oh my goodness, some of these buds and how they open up are just spectacular.
They're
and how
beautiful.
they are almost reminiscent of other things, like that almost looks like a hellebore bloom to me as it's getting ready to open up.
That color too, that
Color.
dark.
And then we've got some bicolor here, the white with this, again, this kind of orchid color.
Yeah.
We even call that an orchid color. And then some of these lemon limey gold ones. And then aren't these darling? These tiny little petite ones.
These are so cute. They're so little, especially compared to like, look at these. I mean, that just shows how vast the family is of Phalaenopsis. I mean, they're just so cute, and they stay small.
And they stay small. And these are darling. I like to keep those one in my bathroom because I think that's a sweet little appointment. Okay.
They can just go anywhere.
So, as I said, my go-to is practically always white. Dare I diverge from my natural instinct? Oh, it's so hard to decide. It's so hard to decide. But you know what? I'm going to live life on the edge.
Ooh.
I think I'm going to go, maybe because it seems a little springier to me. How about we go with these gorgeous yellow ones? Because now I'm thinking maybe where I was originally going to put it, I might put it someplace different. Okay, so let's go for it. So how many do you think would fit in that container?
That container size, I've done 2 and 3 before. I would say I like odd numbers. Odd numbers work in design.
Oh, I agree. I agree.
Let's do 3.
Okay, let's do 3. So we'll pick them out, and then we've got some other decisions to make. So we'll be back. So isn't this container gorgeous?
Yes.
It's got this really organic form to it, almost as if it was molded by lava. I think it's really gorgeous.
Yes.
And a lot of times when I do orchids, they're always in white containers. So I'm really, like I say, on this arrangement, I am really going outside my comfort zone.
That's awesome.
So, okay, so what's the starting point?
So yeah, basically, we'll start off with the orchids, and what we'll often do is replace this metal, like it's just a wire that they come on from the nursery, like that's the one they guide it up on when it first starts.
Okay.
The flower spike, we'll replace that, and we'll replace these clips with, we'll replace the stick with a decorative stick, and we have a lot of options over here. So we've got, we've got all these various, all kinds of different styles.
A wonderland of sticks.
Oh, yes.
A wonderland of sticks.
Quite a selection.
And I bet some of these you use, I can see some of these being used extensively around the holidays.
Oh, yeah.
I, of course, always want it to look organic. You know that about me, Phoebe. I want it to always look organic and as if it was something that I just clipped outside. And since I don't have a lot of stuff to clip from at my new cottage, these are interesting.
Yeah, I love those.
These are interesting, and so are those mossy ones. Yeah, this. Oh, look at that. That's very whimsical, but it also looks organic. So I'm going to let you pick out what you think we might need.
Sure.
So this is where the sausage gets made, or that's not a very good analogy. I should say the magic gets made, and this is a fun little thing. This is just a cutter.
Yeah, a wire cutter.
A wire cutter.
Usually it's like this can cut any stick, and it'll even cut these metal wires. Like if someone wants to keep the wire and just trim it down so it isn't restricting the
Wow,
orchid.
if you did a lot of flower arranging, that would be worth its weight in gold.
Oh, I think this came from our old flower department. I think
Really?
yeah, I think that's exactly
I wonder
it.
what it's called. I wonder if you could find one of those online.
Yeah, it looks like in its ancient text that's on here, easy
Yeah.
cutter.
Easy cutter.
Yeah.
Okay, well, and it certainly is an easy cutter. Okay, so you're
Yeah.
cutting lengths of coated wire.
Yes,
So I'm watching this intently to see how it's a fit. I've done it before.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, she's going to replace these sticks, which actually I don't think are necessarily unappealing.
Oh, yeah.
Because they look organic to me, but I think she can make them look even more spectacular.
Oh, yes.
And these, Phoebe, these are these tiny little hair clips. I need to make sure that I remember, and if I don't remember, it's Stuart's fault, to put a link to these, because these are great in flower arranging in general.
Oh,
so
yes.
when you put in this rather Dr. Seussian looking stake,
Yeah.
are you being careful to not puncture the roots? Does it really damage the roots? Does it make that much difference?
So
Is it?
honestly, a lot of the time, it's kind of unavoidable but also, I mean, just a little bit of like, I might graze them when I do
Yeah.
this, but I'm gonna trim this to make it a point so it's easier to put in here. A lot of the time with Phalaenopsis orchids, the roots will grow kind of closer to the surface, like the outside of the pot, because they like to be able to breathe, photosynthesize a little bit, and so that's nice. It works out like that.
Okay, so this is taking me back to high school science. Are orchids epiphytic?
They are. Yes, they are. They, in the wild, they grow in like the little crooks of tree branches, and yeah, just kind of, that's why you plant them in sphagnum moss or bark instead of soil, because it kind of mimics that lightness of media that they're in the wild.
Like in Singapore. I remember those in Singapore. And so talk a little bit about the care of these orchids and their life cycle.
So basically, when they come to us, they're in this flowering state of and it's easy to get them to flower in a like in a nursery setting, because it's all hormonal, it's light based. So these people that mass produce them can make them all like they just turn the switches on basically and get them to all start flowering. But once they're in like a home environment, once people adopt them and take them home,
I love that, adopt them.
yes, they bring your orchids into your home. They kind of get on this other schedule of like they typically will rebloom, and it's not really as hard as a lot of people think it is, because they're kind of an intimidating looking plant. A lot of people, but
They're so exotic looking.
yeah, exactly. People get nervous about, like they're like, oh, I killed an orchid before. It's like that's okay. That's where it usually starts, because they do have some specific.
Okay, so basic
requirements.
care, once you get your orchid home, whatever its provenance, whether it's, and that's one thing about the orchids at Calvert's, they are in such great condition because they take such good care of them. And again, you can find probably at a lower price point, but not nearly as good a condition.
Oh yes.
So many different places. But once you get your orchid home, how often should I water this?
Oh yeah. So basically, and that brings me to the first thing. A lot of people have this urge to repot stuff as soon as they get it. It's especially a no-no with orchids, because they are going to be fine in this pot size for like a long time. I've had some in pots still for like over 2 years.
Yeah.
Eventually the media will break down and you'll need to replace it, but it can be in the same size pot. But watering, speaking of the pot, what you're going to want to do is, it'll be about every 7 to 10 days, sometimes up to 14 days, depending on the light.
And you just feel it to see.
Yeah, exactly. You'll feel it. See, this still feels, damp enough that I'm not going to worry about it. And then you'll also look at the roots. See how green those are. They're really like a pretty vibrant green right now, which means
That's a great tip.
yeah, they're nice and hydrated.
But if you looked and they were this more woody color, then you would think they probably needed to be watered. And you said anywhere from once a week to once 2 weeks, depending on. And there's no substitute for actually feeling.
Definitely.
Okay.
It's all about the feel.
Okay. Somebody is getting a phone call, so this would be a good place to take a break. And let's come down now and actually show how you position and support them.
Yes.
In the container and what we're going to talk dressing.
Perfect. Sounds great.
Well, Phoebe has taken a great, let me start over again.
And 3, 2.
Well, Phoebe has made these gorgeous orchids stand up and fly right with the help of these sticks, and true to form, she did not let her plants boss her, and she whipped them into shape. So we've got them now, the stems sturdy in their growing container, and now we need to really stabilize them inside this container. So this is where you guys out there are really going to want to pay attention, and leads me to my question of the day. Have you guys, just let us know, have you guys ever used any of these techniques before? You might have different kind of unique materials that you use to help stabilize and keep the contents of your cachepot or your pot in place while it is on display. Okay, so how do we start building this infrastructure?
So the first thing I do, I'll take an orchid and I'll see how high up I want it to come in the pot. And it looks like I'm not gonna have to boost this up. Like, you know, a lot of the time I'll do layers of styrofoam to build it up. Styrofoam is gonna be our main component of structure.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna see, looks like I'm gonna do one like that and like that. And so then I'm gonna take these little saucers that are gonna be great for several reasons. They're really nice for, like, for one, letting the orchid drain into that way. Mm-hmm. And then for two, like, just you can just, once I have this all built up, I'll just plug the orchids in. But it looks like I'm gonna need to trim these because there's too many, so I'm gonna just go ahead and.
Okay, that's a good tip. I would have just continually tried to force them and cram them in there, or tried to tape them in there.
It's called American ingenuity.
Well, or common sense, which I am quite often in short supply of. But Phoebe is a professional.
Oh.
So Phoebe knows all of these tips and tricks, and you could probably, this would be a good way to recycle some things that you've got at your house, some of those red drinking cups and things like that. It would be a good way to do it. Okay, so that fits a little bit better.
It does.
Now the other thing I bet that we're going to want to be mindful of is how we place them and how they arch and kind of the form that they will take.
Definitely. That'll be for sure something to, like, we'll get them all in their position and rotate them.
Yeah.
See how the leaves fall.
Yeah. This is a good way to put that nasty styrofoam.
Oh gosh.
Back.
See how now
to reuse it. Oh, look at, see now they're all on the same level. Oh yeah, just thinking through a problem. It is good old American ingenuity. Again, sometimes I am often too impatient, and I try to just force things into place instead of thinking through and being a little bit more delicate and thoughtful about what I'm doing and the structure of what I'm doing. And that's sometimes what separates the professional from the amateur, like moi. Right, Phoebe?
Oh, well, it's like I don't even think about it anymore. But yeah, you really do have to kind of consider where the weight of the plant is going to fall. And all the styrofoam we use, like, I don't feel bad about using it because it's recycled from what our pots are shipped in. So
yes,
It already exists, right? You got to find a use for it.
you got to find a use for it. But boy, is it messy.
it is.
Yeah.
I feel like I'm always like dusting it off of
Yeah.
everything afterwards.
Yeah, sticking to your clothing and yes. So it's science. It's science and math. We're like using physics and architecture, and she uses words like leverage, and I love that.
I'm glad I can masquerade as being a pro.
Oh, I don't think you're masquerading, darling. I think you're doing it. I think you're doing it. And you know, it's part of, I guess it's part of the fun. It's part, you know, kind of like playing with building blocks if you're a kid. It is kind of part of the fun.
It is.
But to me, the funnest part is when you put them in place and then you decide, oh, how am I going to torque this one? How am I going to twist that one? And what kind of story is it going to tell once the orchids are in place?
I almost forgot to leaf shine the leaves.
Okay. Is that probably something that is available to the average consumer? We'll see if we can find a source for that.
Yeah, it's really great for like orchids and things that are. It's best to use it on stuff that isn't going to be right in a window, like right in the sun, like because it can. But I mean, it's a really mild thing. It's just like an oil-based dust repellent, and it does add a really nice polish.
So
it soak up too much sun, kind of is what it does when it's on there?
Yeah, it can be like
the
tanning
reflection.
oil.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's
Oh, like tanning oil
that's
for
a good
orchids. That's a great analogy. But it doesn't in any way harm the plant or give it clogged pores or anything like that.
It's still very breathable.
Yeah. Okay. Very breathable. Thank you. And we'll have to see if we can find. I bet we can find an online source. But again, this is something that transforms something average into something beautiful because it helps it reflect the light. It might also help with moisture loss, I bet.
It does. That is another thing that it does.
And
it's interior scaping product for that.
yeah, and also keep maybe the leaves from browning, which is so often a problem. So could you spray this on any kind of house plant?
Most types. There are some that are more sensitive to having anything on the leaves. Like it's not recommended for ficus. There are other foliage cleaners that you can use.
Okay.
But with these, it's best for like thicker leaves or like pothos, philodendron.
Yeah.
Those all do well with
right.
them.
Hoyas maybe.
Oh, Hoyas.
Okay. So now we do what?
Now it's time to put them in, and then it's kind of it's a bit of a literal balancing act at first when you're trying to get them all in place, but we've got these little pieces of styrofoam to kind of
secure it as we go along. Okay.
So I'll go ahead and start. I'll just see how they all sit in here. And it looks like we're off to a good start. It didn't immediately
fall over.
A lot of the time.
Always a good start.
And we can kind of see.
You have to look at which way the leaves go too, so it.
It's true. It's and then you can look at the density of the sticks, the shape that they'll be. That looks pretty cool.
Okay.
One in the middle.
Okay.
So then I always wish I had 3 arms while I do
yes.
this. So that's
well,
perfect.
well, I'm here today. Okay.
Yes. And then I'll put this one.
It takes a village.
It really does.
Okay, here, let me move that guy
Perfect.
out of the way. And so it's like putting a puzzle together, I think.
See, look at that.
Of how they're going to look. And I like some of them to kind of arch over that way. So, but it's the puzzle pieces of not just the flowers, but the leaves as well, so that you don't, like this guy, get squished.
It's true.
Okay.
Sometimes we'll even like trim leaves, which I hate doing, but sometimes it's like if that's the only way it's going to be able to be happy, like and secure in there, we have to do it.
Now, do you ever do like a choo-choo train kind of thing where you attached one pot to the other pot?
I have done that. That's exactly. I've like done all kinds of weird wirings, like because we'll get these containers that people will bring in, but they're like, I really want.
Or like this one, that's kind of a really different shape and
Exactly, and so it's like I feel like sometimes I have to I want to do it for them, and we make it work every time. We're never like, oh, we can't. It's a weird shape.
Yeah.
So we'll always make it happen.
And there's always more styrofoam.
There's
always more styrofoam. Here, let me see. Can I?
Yeah, for sure. You want to tuck some around the thing.
I'm probably not that. It's almost like that needs to be a little thicker. Don't try this at home.
We're getting daring.
Yeah, we're getting really daring. That's going to pop right back out.
Oh, you might be able to.
There. Okay.
Sweet. And then keep in mind, all of our mechanics in here, all our engineering is going to be covered up by the moss that we're going to.
Yeah, we're going to hide our uglies. We're going to hide our uglies. So now can we kind of reposition these guys just a little bit so they don't look. Because I like a little negative space. Oh yeah, that looks beautiful.
Because that's going to be the viewing side over here, which you guys have been looking at.
Well, this is actually going to be placed in, I don't know, I've got two locations in mind. One, it will be seen 360, and the other probably just more from one side. And I'm going to keep these out of direct sun. So like these aren't going to go in a window. They are also not going to go in a window, or hopefully not near a door or something where they will be constantly exposed to really dramatic changes in temperature, like the opening and closing of doors or wind or things like that. So I'm going to try to be mindful about that when I place it. And then also, for obvious reasons, you don't want it to be in a really bright sunny window, because that will shorten the lifespan of the flowers.
Yeah.
Now sometimes we want to do that for effect for short periods of time, but if you want the blooms to last, then placement is important.
It can also be, I mean, if you're getting them to rebloom, they do like that sun, but it's like once
they've bloomed, yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, and we'll save that, how to get them to rebloom, for another time. We were able to go up and see an absolutely gorgeous orchid hothouse in Stillwater, and they made us honorary members of the Oklahoma Orchid Society. Amazing, absolutely amazing. And this is, as I said earlier, I'm treating myself, and a wonderful way to treat yourself this time of year. And it's good around, because we are just past Valentine's Day, when they're readily available, when orchids are readily available a lot of different places, because they're such a popular plant.
Oh, yes.
And they're popular not only because they're beautiful and their price point has come down so much, but also because they're so long-lived.
Oh, yeah.
The blooms will last for a really long time. Now, Phoebe, I sometimes do a cheat, because quite often the flowers fade before the foliage does.
Yeah.
And so sometimes you can get such realistic, you can probably get them here too, realistic silk-looking blooms.
Yeah.
Yes.
We've got them.
Yeah, I assumed you probably did. And then you can cut them off, and while the foliage is still looking good, while you're waiting for it to rebloom, you can put in that silk foliage, and it still looks equal. I have done it where I've mixed the two, the real and the faux, and I can't tell the difference most of the time. So that's another way to increase the longevity of your arrangement.
Definitely, because like these leaves are so tough, and they have a really cool look all to them.
Oh, yes. They're brilliant. Okay, so now for the next layer. We feel like this is pretty secure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And yeah, it's like the Titanic, an iceberg couldn't knock it over. I love moss. I'm a purist in my orchids. Typically, I like to only top dress them with moss, and we have different options, starting with some, I would call it synthetic Spanish moss.
Yeah.
Which is made, a good recycling tip, made from shredded paper, and then do they colorize it or something to get that silver sheen?
Yeah, they do. They produce it in, I am like pretty sure it's made from recycled paper, and even if this isn't, I know other places do that. And they like kind of shred it and weave it like recycled paper, and then
it looks very, very real. In some cases better, because it doesn't match so much. Now, I think this would be a cool option, because I think it picks up the tonal qualities of the container. But again, I am such a moss freak that I've got to have this succulent moss. So talk to us about the varieties that are available, and as importantly, how you can keep it fresh looking.
Yes.
Because it so often when you harvest it yourself or whatever, it dries out, it turns brown, it doesn't stay green. So correct me if I'm wrong. All of this is preserved moss?
Yes, it is.
And what do we mean by preserved? How have they treated it?
Yeah. So basically it's real moss. It's all real, but it has gone through this chemical process of preservation. They mostly use glycerin. It's like some sort of glycerin-based process, and then they go through afterwards and enhance them with
a colorant.
Yeah, exactly, with a colorant. And this is the mood moss. It actually is not enhanced with a colorant, but it is like glycerin preserved, so that color is just locked in.
I could do this myself. If I foraged some moss from my own resources, not from public resources people, but from my own resources, I could, in a solution of glycerin and water.
Maybe so. I'm sure there are ways to DIY it, because we actually get that from just someone who does harvest it, so it can be done. You don't need a big.
You know what?
process.
That's probably something we could Google. And she just a short while ago, and this is what I do too. You just submerged this in water to rehydrate it, and then she squeezed it out just like a sponge. This is probably my favorite because it's got this kind of moundy form. But typically, I mix it with other forms. So describe to me these other two forms of sheet moss.
Yeah. So this is the sheet moss. It's just a really flat. You can definitely see how it's been enhanced with green coloration, green colorant. So that's one type. The color lasts a long time. This is a preserved. I said it was like a star moss. I'm not as familiar with. So this is, we call it Mossman moss because that's who makes it. But that's another really nice dark green.
It almost has an aquatic quality to it.
It does, that teal. I know what you mean. And this is its close relative, the shag moss. And this is great because these two are going to last the longest. Yeah, in terms of greenness, because they're just very, well captured.
Okay. And I'm going to guess that sheet moss, you also hydrate before you use it to make it malleable. To kind of form fit around.
This kind we actually don't, because it's pretty sensitive to water. Like you actually don't want to get it wet. Like even once it's
really?
Yeah,
okay, well maybe that's a mistake I've been making. Okay, good to know.
It helps it not fade as quickly because it. In fact, when we put it on arrangements, we recommend people like pull it back
before they water.
Yeah.
Interesting. Well, so that tells me that I want to use these three then, because I like the way it looks moist and very succulent. And I noticed that we're not using anything that I associate more with Christmas or cacti, and that's things like reindeer moss and some of the gray top dressings. Okay, so let's do a combination then of this cushion moss and the star moss, and what did you call this? The shag moss? Okay, what a great name, like shag carpet. Yeah, let's do it. Let's do a combination of that. So this is that beautiful shag moss. Now, again, I loved what you said earlier about putting more styrofoam in there so that way you don't have to have as much moss. And speaking of, people often ask me, where do I get my moss? And I say I get it from Calvert's. Yeah. And a lot of times I will just come in and say I need a box of moss or whatever, and I'll select what I want, and then I reuse it from arrangement to arrangement.
That's a good
and
idea.
You can kind of freshen it up. And I might try, you and I were talking, I might try figuring out a way, that would be a good DIY, to see if we could use some coloring and get it to look green and fresh again, because that's my frustration, is it doesn't always look it doesn't stay looking fresh, and maybe it's because I was trying to keep it fresh by getting it moist.
I can see how, yeah, that might speed up.
Yeah, but it does get desiccated when you don't. So it's a give and take. But oh my gosh, isn't this absolutely looking just lovely and succulent?
It's so pretty. I do just love,
And I selected just this, what I call cushion moss. And by the way, wouldn't this be brilliant in a container by itself? Just a mound of moss. You know, you can get live moss sometimes in spring, but you could also use this preserved moss and just form fit it over a container, and I think that would be brilliant as well, even as a side little companion, a little baby to this mothership. Well, Phoebe, I think this is pretty spectacular.
Thanks.
I love it. I love our color selection. I love our moss selection. I love the elegant simplicity of it, and now it just remains to be seen where it will get to reside, maybe in a couple of different places. So it's cold today, and I want to protect it from drastic temperature changes. So we're going to cover this little baby up, and I'm going to take her home. And I cannot thank you enough for your expertise. I can't thank Calvert's enough for letting us do this today. And could you give the address where Calvert's is located in Oklahoma City? And for those of you coming from out of town, I highly recommend you come to Calvert's in the Belle Isle area. But would you just tell us what the address is here?
Yeah, so we're at 5308 North Classen Boulevard in Oklahoma City. And that's zip code 73118. We're actually, geographic center of Oklahoma City is in our parking lot, so we're right in the middle of the city.
Oh, wow.
Oh, I didn't know that. That's an interesting little piece of trivia. And amazing different kinds of large specimen house plants, but also an amazing array of outdoor pots. And I will be coming back and tempting myself with lots of those as the gardening season begins. Thank you, darling. I appreciate it.
Yes, it's so good to see you.
Well, I promised to share where this gorgeous arrangement of these beautiful yellow tone Phalaenopsis orchids turned up in my home. And as you can see, it's on top of the dresser, the chest of drawers in my bedroom, keeping company with this gorgeous painting of Canyon de Chelly that hangs in our bedroom. And some of you might recognize that iron candelabra of sorts, votive candelabra, that I found thrifting at Goodwill on one of our thrifting adventures a while back. And because I've got the gorgeous orchids on one end, I don't need anything in this beautiful wooden vessel here, and it can kind of just stand on its own as a piece of sculpture. But I just love the way the orchids look here. And this beautiful coffee table music on Spotify, coffee table jazz on Spotify, really sets the mood. So there you go. Where this beautiful composition by my darling Phoebe ended up